Okay, so I want to show you a fun new trick, and I'm gonna do a few different versions of it. So this is kind of like creating your own stencil. What I'm doing here is I've taken a craft punch. A lot of us have these laying around, and I have a few, and I don't use them that much, so I'm always looking for reasons to. So you could probably do this just with a pair of scissors. I like the symmetry, and I happen to have this laying around. But if you're crafty with an X-Acto knife or scissors, you could do the same thing. And what I'm using is a mailing label. This is a piece that I've cut out of a larger sheet that I just had in my office. If you're looking to do this on the cheap, you can get something like this from the post office for free to try. And then if you like it, don't take too many of those. But so what I've done is I've cut out, using my craft punch, or if you're using scissors or an X-Acto knife, cut out some shapes. And since it's a sticky label, I've taken one of them off and applied it to a rock. And you can see it's a floral design. And I'm just gonna press down really well to make sure it's sticky. It's sticking well. Okay. And then I have a tray set up here with my ombre paint sponge. So if you don't know how to do this, I have another video on this whole technique. I'm not going to go through the details because it takes a little bit of explaining, but very simple once you look through it. So I have my sponge already, and here's what I'm going to do. Using this kind of circular design, I'm going to use this to stencil the color and kind of an ombre effect on this flower. So you see how I'm applying that? Now I'm going to go rotating, first making sure I get really on there. Then I'm going to rotate and do the next petal and go all the way around. So normally when I'm doing this, I'm going around a rock or in a particular stripe. This is rotating it and getting a kind of different effect. Now you can see that this paint coverage isn't perfect, so I'm going to let this dry for a minute, and then I'll come back and do another application so we can see how bright we can get those colors. All right, so we're going to see if we can get a little better coverage. I've got a fresh sponge all set here, and I've mentioned in my other video, less is more in this application of ombre because it just sticks better if you don't have a lot of goopy paint. But particularly when you're doing something with a stencil, you're going to get a little bleed underneath the edges of this. This is an imprecise and kind of experimental process, but you don't want globs of it and leakiness. So really in this case, less is more. And if you're not sure, just kind of test it and make sure you're getting kind of just a touch of paint when you press lightly down, not blobs, and then you'll know you're set. Okay, so again, I'm gonna go around the edges of this, and I find it best to come from the outside. That way you're not pushing paint kind of underneath the edge. So I'm coming in this direction, watching my colors to make sure they're kind of blending, make sure my pink is showing up on the outside of that petal. And the position of my sponge is giving me the right distribution of color. Okay. There we go. So in a second, after this is dry, I'll pull that off and I'll show you what that looks like. And I'm just gonna go back and make sure I've got good coverage at the tips of that. Now, we're going to use Posca pens to finish this off once we pull our stencil off. So I'm going to do a couple other colors. I'll do those on some time lapse so you can watch, and then we'll decorate them and show you what you can do here. All right, so I think we have waited long enough on these to dry, so I'm going to peel this off. And these are just paper labels. If you're using something like a contact paper, they won't tear very easily, but these do tear. I did a couple other ones in other shades. a little bit of paper behind. Should be able to lift that little scrap of paper right off. Sometimes you need to grab a tweezer or something. So another idea, I'm going to clean this up and play with the designs a little bit, but I wanted to mention, if you have kids and you buy stickers, the outline of their stickers makes a good stencil in a pinch. You could use that. Also, you're going to be left with these inside, you know, the sort of donut hole, so to speak, of this process. And I would say those are handy too, because if you apply them, there'll be a reverse stencil. Go over them with an ombre if you have a base coat of a plain color, and you could get a cool effect. I'm not playing with them this time, but I am holding on to them for later. So for this particular one that I'm going to demonstrate decorating and how to fancy up, you know, you do see I get some bleed over underneath that. But for those of you that are a little bit challenged artistically, you know, you don't feel like maybe your freehand drawing is that great, this is a good technique, because now I can just take a bright pink, for example, my Posca pen, and trace around the outside. And I'm just going over any of the kind of yucky edge that I wasn't real happy with. You do want to make sure that your paint that you used with the stencil is really dry, because if not, it's going to grab, the nib of your pen is going to grab it and cause some issues, either with clogging or messing up your pretty design. Now, in this instance, I am going to continue on and probably add some details to the flower, a center, maybe some leaves around it, maybe a few little accents and highlights. But you needn't. I mean, that right there is pretty cool. So you could just leave it like this. I think it'd be nice also to have, you know, a word next to it, a little calligraphy or something. But it's just a very simple technique, and you could do all different shapes of this. I mean, I also was thinking of just doing circular versions, so that I had a nice little frame to write a message or something in it. So a lot of applications, and, you know, use your own creative ideas to see what you come up with.